Okay, let's talk about trust in financial advice. When you get a recommendation, maybe for your pension or a big investment, how do you really know it's objective?
Mm.
How can you be sure it's purely about what's best for you and not, well, influenced by how the advisor gets paid?
That's the absolute crux of it, isn't it? It's the potential conflict of interest that the UK regulators, specifically the FCA with their COBS rules, have really tackled head on over the last decade or so.
Right.
So our mission today really is to dive into those specific rules. We want to get past the jargon and understand your fundamental rights as a client.
Okay.
We're looking at how advisor fees work now to cut out bias, what your rights are if you need to cancel something, and this really important area of how advisors must look after vulnerable customers.
Yeah, that vulnerability piece feels increasingly critical. Okay, let's get into it then. Where should we start? Maybe with the biggest change.
Hmm.
How advisors are actually paid these days for investments and pensions.
Absolutely. Let's start there. Because it was quite a radical shift, the core principle now is that for personal recommendations on retail investments, things like ISAs, funds, and pensions, advisors must be paid only through something called advisor charging.
Advisor charging.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means the money comes
From you, the client, directly. It completely severs the old link where the product provider, like an insurance company or fund manager, paid the advisor commission.
so no more hidden payments from the companies whose products are being recommended.
Exactly. The rules are very explicit. Advisors cannot ask for or accept any commission for making these personal recommendations.
And it works both ways.
Yes, it's a
Yep.
two-way street. The product providers are also banned from offering or paying any commission or, well, any similar kind of payment to the advisor for that business.
That sounds pretty comprehensive. A real attempt to stamp out that bias.
It was designed precisely for that. But it's important to note there's a key exception here.
Oh.
This strict commission ban applies to investments and pensions, but it doesn't apply across the board.
Right.
For advice on general insurance, home, car, or pure protection only policies like life insurance or income protection.
Right, the pure insurance stuff.
Yes, commission is actually still permitted for those types of products.
Okay, that's a useful distinction. So for investments and pensions, the client pays the advisor directly. But how does that stop an advisor maybe, recommending a product from provider A over provider B because provider A is just easier to deal with? Or maybe offers, I don't know, better biscuits at meetings.
Well, maybe not the biscuits. But you raise a good point about potential subtle influences. The FCA thought about this. The rules state the firm must use an appropriate charging structure.
Okay.
And here's the really clever bit, I think. The charge you pay, the advisor charge, it cannot vary based on which product provider is chosen. Or even which specific product is recommended, assuming there are multiple suitable options for you. It has to be consistent.
So if product X from company A and product Y from company B are both suitable pensions for me, the advisor has to charge me the same fee regardless of which one I choose.
Precisely. Let's say the advice fee is £500. It's £500 whether you go with company A or company B. This removes the financial incentive to pick one provider over another.
But wait, couldn't that just mean they recommend the product that's, I don't know, quickest for them to set up, less paperwork, even if another one might be marginally better?
That's a fair challenge. But that's where the advisor's overarching professional duty comes in, the duty to act in your best interests. That's a separate, very strong requirement. The charging rule specifically tackles the financial bias from the product provider side.
Got it. So it isolates and removes that specific conflict. And presumably, this charging structure has to be upfront.
Oh, absolutely. Transparency is key. They must tell you their charging structure in writing, nice and clear, no jargon before you commit. And wherever they can, they need to state the actual charge in cash terms.
Pounds and pence.
Exactly. So you know exactly what you're paying for the advice itself.
And what about ongoing advice? If you want regular reviews.
Good point. Ongoing charges can generally only be levied if there's an explicit agreement for an ongoing service. We'll review your portfolio every year. There's a small exception for regular contribution products, but mostly you pay for ongoing service if you've agreed to it.
Right. Now, you mentioned biscuits.
Mm.
Are any perks allowed from product providers? Even small things?
Yes. The rules do allow for what they call minor non-monetary benefits. Think really small scale.
Like what? A branded pen?
Maybe slightly more than a pen, but we're talking things like attending a generic training session on, say, new pension legislation, or receiving standard product information documents, maybe basic hospitality like coffee and a sandwich at a conference.
So definitely not like tickets to Wimbledon or a weekend golf trip.
Absolutely not. Those days are gone. The benefit has to be of genuinely minimal value, de minimis, the rules say. And crucially, it must enhance the quality of service to you, the client, and not impair the advisor's duty to act in your best interest.
And they still have to disclose these little things.
Yes, they need to be disclosed, usually in a generic way. It stops essential things like training being blocked, but keeps the door firmly shut on anything that could look like a bribe or improper influence.
That feels like a sensible balance.
Yeah.
Okay, so the advice should be unbiased because the payment structure is clean. Let's switch tracks slightly. You get the advice, you pay the fee, you sign up, and then maybe a week later, you have second thoughts. Cold feet, what then?
That's where client protection rules come in, specifically COBS 15. This covers your right to cancel. If you buy a regulated product like an investment or certain insurance policies, the provider has to send you an official notice, a cooling off notice.
A cooling off notice, okay. And that
Gives
gives
you a statutory right to withdraw from the contract, essentially to cancel it, without penalty or obligation within a specific time frame.
And I guess that time frame varies because buying, say, stocks and shares ISA feels different from committing to a 30-year pension.
It does vary exactly for that reason. The rules recognize the significance of different products. For the longer-term, more significant commitments, you get a longer cooling-off period.
Which ones fall into that category?
That's 30 calendar days, and it applies to life assurance policies, annuities, all types of pensions, lifetime ISAs, and also those pure protection insurance policies we mentioned earlier.
30 days for the big stuff.
Okay.
And for other things, like regular investments.
For those, it's shorter. You get 14 calendar days. That covers general investments like buying units in a fund, stocks and shares ISAs, and even cash deposit ISAs.
14 days. And when does that clock start ticking? From when I sign, or?
It starts from the later of two dates. Either the date the contract is officially concluded or the date you actually receive the full contractual terms and conditions in writing, whichever happens last.
Okay, so you need the paperwork in hand before the countdown begins. Now, I remember there's a really important point about investments where the value can go up and down, like unit trusts. What happens if the market falls during that cooling off period and I decide to cancel?
Ah, yes. This is a crucial detail for lump sum investments into things like unit trusts or investment funds, anything unit linked where the price changes daily.
Right.
If you decide to cancel during the cooling off period and the value of your investment has fallen since you invested.
Do I get all my original money back?
No, not necessarily. You're only entitled to get back the current reduced value of the investment. So if the market dipped, you get back the lower amount. They calculate this based on the current selling price of the units. But importantly, they can't deduct any of their usual charges.
So say I invested £10,000. The market drops 5%, making it worth £9,500. If I cancel within the period, I get £9,500 back.
That's right. You bear the market loss that happened while your money was invested, but you don't pay any exit fees or initial charges. It stops people using the cancellation right as a sort of free bet against the market.
It forces you to accept that your money was actually invested and exposed to risk.
Exactly. But there's a huge protection built in here for the consumer.
What's that?
If the firm messes up, if they fail to give you the correct information about your cancellation rights clearly and on time, then you are not liable for any market fall during that period. If the market drops and they didn't give you the proper cancellation notice, they have to refund your original investment in full. The firm takes the hit.
Wow. That's a massive incentive for firms to get that paperwork right.
Absolutely. It puts the onus squarely on them.
Okay, so we've covered unbiased charging, cancellation rights.
Yeah.
What about the ongoing relationship? Does the advisor's duty just stop once the product is sold and the cooling off period is over?
No, not at all. And this links back to that idea of acting in the client's best interests. The duty extends into ongoing service and care, which is vital because, let's face it, life happens. People's circumstances change constantly.
So what does that ongoing service look like in practice? Is it just waiting for the client to call with a problem?
It really shouldn't be. Good practice and what the regulator expects involves being much more proactive. We can think of service as reactive or proactive. Reactive is, well, reacting. The client calls you, or you get a notification about a missed payment, or sadly, dealing with a death claim.
Okay, responding to events.
Yes. But proactive service is where the real value is added, I think. That's about the advisor initiating contact, arranging reviews based on future known events, maybe retirement is 5 years away, or a child is heading to university soon.
Looking ahead.
Exactly. Or just agreeing a regular review schedule, say, annually, because things change, don't they? People get married, divorced, have children, move house, change jobs. All these things can significantly impact your financial needs and goals.
And that ties directly into this really important area the FCA is focusing on now, vulnerable customers. How do they actually define vulnerability in this context?
The FCA's definition is quite broad but clear. A vulnerable customer is someone who, due to their personal circumstances, is especially susceptible to harm, particularly when a firm isn't acting with appropriate levels of care.
Especially susceptible to harm.
Okay.
That forces firms to think differently.
It really does. They have to actively consider vulnerability and adjust how they communicate and deal with clients accordingly. It's not a box-ticking exercise. It's about genuinely understanding and responding to individual needs.
And the FCA helps by outlining the main things that can cause someone to be vulnerable.
Right. Yes. They identify 4 key drivers of vulnerability. It's a helpful framework. First is health, physical or mental health conditions that might affect your ability to manage finances or make decisions.
Okay.
Second, life events. Big disruptive things like bereavement, losing a job, relationship breakdown. Third is resilience. This means having a low ability to cope with financial or emotional shocks. Maybe you have very little savings, high debt, or erratic income.
Right, not much of a buffer.
Exactly. And fourth is capability. This could be low knowledge or confidence about financial matters, maybe poor literacy or numeracy skills, or even limited digital skills if services are online.
Those 4 drivers cover a lot of ground. So using their examples, someone who's recently widowed and maybe their partner always handled the money, they could easily fall under life events and maybe capability.
Precisely. Or someone struggling after being made redundant fits life event and potentially resilience. The advisor has a clear duty to recognize these situations and adapt how they help, ensuring extra care, clearer explanations, maybe involving family if appropriate and agreed.
It feels like a much more human-centered approach to regulation.
I think that's the intention. Now, just before we wrap up, it might be useful to quickly clarify a couple of terms people often mix up.
And a good idea.
The difference between financial advice and financial guidance, and also between independent and restricted advice.
Yes, definitely. Advice versus guidance first.
So regulated advice, which is mostly what we've been talking about, leads to a specific personal recommendation. It's telling you, based on your circumstances, you should buy pension fund X.
A direct instruction.
Yes, whereas guidance is more general information. It might help you understand options, maybe narrow them down, but it stops short of recommending a specific product or action. It might say, people planning for retirement often consider pensions, but it won't tell you which pension to buy.
Okay. Information versus recommendation. And independent versus restricted.
Independent advice means the advisor can consider and recommend products from the entire retail market. They aren't tied to any specific providers. Their scope is unrestricted.
The whole menu.
Pretty much. Restricted advice means the advisor is limited in some way. They might only recommend products from a limited number of providers, perhaps even just one company group. Or they might restrict the type of products they advise on. For example, an advisor who only deals with mortgages gives restricted advice.
Right. So important to know which type of advice you're getting. Okay, let's try and pull this together then. What are the main takeaways for listeners? Well, we've seen this huge shift away from commission towards transparent advisor charging for investments and pensions, aiming squarely at eliminating bias. That feels fundamental.
Definitely. Then there are those clear cooling off periods, 30 days for major things like pensions, 14 for others like ISAs, giving you vital breathing space, even with that important detail about market falls for investments.
Yeah, the market risk point is key. And finally, this really significant focus on ongoing service and the regulatory duty to identify and provide appropriate care for vulnerable customers based on those 4 drivers: health, life events, resilience, and capability.
Taken together, these rules really paint a picture of a financial advice market that's intended to be far more transparent, fair, and genuinely client-focused than it perhaps used to be. The responsibility is firmly on the firms to act properly.
So here's something to think about as we finish. Considering everything we've discussed, especially those drivers of vulnerability like life events which can happen to any of us, how flexible is your own financial plan right now? Are the products you hold actually adaptable enough if something unexpected happens? a job change, illness, bereavement,
Hmm.
and perhaps just as importantly, is the review process you have with your advisor, if you have one, proactive enough to catch these changes early before they become serious financial headaches, something to mull over?